Right. For question 8, we need to manipulate both data sets. We've got roads and we've got an elevation model. We need to find all the roads that have a 65-mile-an-hour speed limit and are sitting at elevations over 3,000. So one thing that came up in class is that there, I think, were roads. Well, I think it came up in class, and then we determined that there aren't any roads greater than 65 miles an hour at elevations above 3,000. But let me just double check how many actual roads we have. Oh, come on. There we go, speed limit. Yep, so we do have quite a few roads with higher speed limits, so we'll have to be aware of that. In my mind, I was thinking greater than 65 miles per hour, and so I definitely set up my analysis that way. So this time I'll run it with just 65-mile-an-hour roads, and we'll just see what the difference is. But inspecting our data, again, I can't stand looking at blue roads. Sorry, they're not rivers, and that drives me crazy. Okay. So we cannot evaluate data that's outside the raster, right? We're obviously not going to be able to select roads that are outside our raster because we're going to be isolating areas that are over 3,000 meters of elevation, and we don't have that out here. So it's really not an issue. And what I would like to start with is just reclassifying our raster to identify the areas that are greater than 3,000. So this is another absolutely fundamental tool that I want you to be really comfortable using, is reclassify. And changing your rasters into classes of different values. You can, classify them and make them ordinal. You can make them binary, which is what this probably gets used for most often. So we're going to make a binary output of, 1 equals greater than 3,000 and no data is everything less than, because we don't want to deal with those areas at all. So reclassify, we're going to input our elevation. Remember, rasters have a value and a count. The value is the cell value, and that's our elevation, so that makes perfect sense. Hit the classify button if nothing pops up there. And we only want 2 classes, and it doesn't really matter what our type is. We know if it's going to start at 1352, which makes sense, that's our lowest elevation. We want it to end at 3,000. This can also be 3,000 because if you remember, ARC separates this to 3,000.0000001, and then we're going to leave our max value in there so we don't run into issues with creating extra classes. This is the one we want to keep, and this is the one that we want to say goodbye to. So I'm going to leave it like that. We're taking our lower elevations and making them no data, and our upper elevations, I don't care what number they are, and we can call this elevation. Hi. Run it, and hopefully we'll get something that makes sense. Okay, it's finished running. How can we verify if our results are correct? We can use the Explore tool to sample across this gradient. Here we should see elevations that are lower than 3,000, and we sure do. If we click inside the polygon, we should see elevations over 3,000 meters, and we do. And I can just randomly click around to convince myself that that's right, but it looks right on. We also only have the one class. That makes good sense because what we want to do, at least in my humble opinion, is convert this to a polygon like we did in the hydrology lab. Then we can use the polygon to cut the roads and just get only the roads in the steep or in the high area. So that's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to run raster to polygon. All right, my input raster is my elevation's high. Now, I did see that a lot of you, when you reclassified this, you ended up with two classes. You had one class that represented all the low elevations and one for the high. So that what you'd see here is a rectangle. And you'd have all the low areas of the DEM as one big shape file. And then you'd have, you know, your high areas as the other shape files. And you can deal with that because you don't need them all to be polygons. It's going to be really hard to use this entire raster to clip the roads, because then you're just going to end up with roads that cover the whole raster. You only care about this area here, this green stuff. So when you reclassify, you're going to get that grid code. So this is the elevation data set. We've got the grid code too. So when we convert this to polygon, if you had other stuff in there, like we had ones, you'd have grid code 1 and 2, and you could just sort through those and select all the grid codes that match your high areas and delete the rest of them, basically. That would be the other way to go about that. So, yep. Okay. So turn off, and we could make that transparent, but we already tested all of the, you know, elevations in there, so it looks good. It looks like we've got a few little polygons for little areas that are over 3,000. So I would guess we have a few rows in here, which doesn't matter, but it's just all about evaluating. Yeah, so 91 little polygons, some of which are probably very, very small, like these little guys here. All right, so we could either pull out our roads by speed limit now, or just go ahead and cut it and then pull out the 65-mile-an-hour roads later. I'm just gonna go ahead and cut it. So I'm gonna use the clip tool because that's the one that acts like a cookie cutter. I don't need to preserve the name of each one of these polygons. I'm going to treat them as just one entity, and so clip works perfectly. And it's the analysis version. So we're going to put in, let's see here. Our clip features are our high polygons, and then the roads are the things we want to cut. Let's see here. I just kind of got messed up with where I left off. But so we got our, I'm just going to back up a little bit. We got our output from clipping. We turned off the inputs so we can evaluate, and we can see that we got it right. I turned off the DEM, and we basically just have our high areas and our clipped roads. We definitely know that we need to cut these because we know that they, some of them at least, extended beyond the polygon border. So I just scrolled to the end of my roads, my clipped roads, right? I want to be working with the clipped one, and tested to see if these are editable. That one's not. This one was. So I calculated geometry, geodesic, put in meters, hit OK. Nothing's going to change because I just did this. All right, but so now I know these are updated lengths. Then I wanted to test and make sure that it was correct. So I zoomed to one of them. This little guy is around 100 meters long. 103, and that's what we have down here. That's very good news. So it looks like these are correct, and we're good to go. So now we're in our roads. Let's go ahead and find out which ones are speed limit greater than 65. Here we go. We'll do a select by not greater than, sorry, that are 65. So let's do speed limit is equal to 65. So we don't have any 75s anymore anyway, so that's good news. So it looks like 13 segments out of the 441 segments have speed limits greater than 65. Let's just check out where those are. Looks like they might all be down here. All we really need to do now, we have isolated the high areas. We've isolated the roads within the high areas. We clipped it to update the geometry. And now we've selected, using select by attribute, the speed limits that are 65 miles an hour. And then we updated this field already. So we should be able to use our statistics shortcut to evaluate the total length. So 220-ish, 221,000 meters for all of the orange roads that are up high, but the ones that are 65 miles an hour, it looks like we have 11,626 meters, which we could easily round to 11.63 kilometers. I have no idea. I can't remember what I put in the answer form, but yeah, again, if you got something different, let's talk about workflow. This is one of those workflows that you can do in any order. You could isolate 65 miles an hour first. You could, I wonder if you could, see, I don't think you can keep the raster, the elevation model in raster form because you're going to want to cut the polylines, and you can't do that well with the raster, even reclassified. You can prove me wrong. It's possible that is possible, but anyway, it's good to have ways to evaluate your results, I guess. So let's leave it there. Major questions or confusion, let's talk about it on Thursday, and we'll go from there.